What's up, everybody? Week 8 start sits and fan mailbag questions. In this video, I'm going to go through the questions of fans who commented. Any fan who comments on my channel, I respond to them and I answer their questions in this video if I haven't already answered your questions for the Thursday night game. So if you have questions for future weeks, please comment on my channel and I will include you in this video. Go through your question in depth. So this video, we're doing that for week 8. I'm going through the fans who comment. Thank you for those of you who comment and support this channel. My channel is very small, but hopefully it'll grow and get there someday. But I'm going to go through the fans who comment and then go through some other scenario questions as well to give you some start-sit comparisons for some questions you might have for this week. If you're interested in more content like this, please check out my channel. I make a lot of content. I make fantasy football. I also make guitar cover songs. I also react to songs too. So if you're interested in sports, music, etc., please check out my channel. Consider like, commenting, or subscribing. So before we get into the questions, I want to bring up 2 talking points for strategy as we're getting to the midway point of the season. As I've mentioned many times on this channel, you want to handcuff your elite running backs. Now we've got Austin Ekeler dealing with a hip injury, and people are rushing to pick up Josh Kelly. So if you own one of these elite running backs, and if you own somebody who's healthy right now, like Najee Harris, Derrick Henry, etc., back these guys up, and it's going to be more valuable for you to have Benny Snell just sitting there on your bench, even if you never play him, because you know that if you do lose Harris, that you're going to be able to plug somebody in who will start right away. So please do that if you have not done that already. It's one of the best ways that you can avoid your teams having a drastic drop-off if you have injuries. So like my team, for example, so I have both Nick Chubb and Dalvin Cook. So I also own Dearness Johnson and Alexander Mattison, because if anything happens to my 2 starting running backs that I've got plugged in as RB1 and RB2, then I could just put the other one in. Especially now that Hunt is injured too, then that is working especially well in my favor by also owning Dearness Johnson. So the other consideration that I want to make too is for bye week players. So let's say that you're getting some trade offers of guys that have relatively equal value and you're struggling to make a decision. So do consider that teams that have already had their byes, like Buffalo, Minnesota, Dallas, the Chargers, the 49ers, even the Jets or the Jaguars, those are all teams that have an advantage for the players you're trading for because they've already had their bye. So you get an additional week with some of these players, and that can be very beneficial during that middle stretch. May not necessarily by the play. I'm not saying that you trade away your players that haven't had a bye by any means, but if you've got a very close call between players and you don't know who to go with the one that has already had their bye. So, for example, you've got Keenan Allen for the Chargers, and you're trying to decide whether or not you want him or somebody like a DK Metcalf. So I would personally, given all the stuff that's going on with Seattle, I would rather have Keenan Allen because he's already had his bye. Another example is, Jerry Jeudy might be thrown out there as somebody in a trade that people have different opinions based on how he's going to do when he comes back. If you get an offer for somebody who's already had their bye, like a Ceedee Lamb, that'd probably be a little too steep for Jeudy. But guys like that have already had their bye, then you're getting a better advantage by having a player who's already had their bye week because you gain an additional week. So please keep that in mind with trades when you get equivalent trade offers, because having that extra bye week is going to help you cover some of your, as you're getting through this middle stretch of the season. So consider that in some of the trade offers that you're getting. So now we will go to fan questions, and thank you for everybody who commented and supported. The first question is from Tom. So this is a trade question. He is asking if he should make this trade. It was giving up James Robinson, Elijah Mitchell, and Sterling Shepard for Derrick Henry, Tyler Lockett, and Alexander Mattison. And he also owns Dalvin Cook. This is an example of a monster trade that you should definitely make. You're getting Derrick Henry, who is the best. He's the one of the top 3 running backs fantasy football, arguably probably top 3 players just because of the scarcity of running backs. Derrick Henry, amazing season so far this year. And you're getting Mattison, which you already have Cook, so you are now creating some insurance for Dalvin Cook by also owning his handcuffs. So that is a huge deal for you. I know Lockett has kind of got some concerns right now given Russell Wilson's health, but you've also got some concerns too with Sterling Shepard's health, who you're giving up in the deal, Elijah Mitchell in terms of, I mean, he looks like the clear-cut back right now in San Francisco, but I'm not 100% confident he'll stay that way all season. So, tough to lose James Robinson, but you are getting a very good haul in this deal. Question from Brandon. So, this is another trade question. Do you trade away Kareem Hunt to acquire Josh Jacobs and Chuba Hubbard? So, Hunt's value is very difficult to gauge because of the injury. And I do like Hunt the most of these 3 running backs when they are all healthy. But my concern is that if you are in a position where you need to get wins and you're not guaranteed to get to the playoffs when Hunt will likely be healthy by that point, then Hunt is not helping you get a spot in the playoffs that you need. And Brandon sent me some of his other running backs, and he does need a little bit of help in the rest of his running back core. So if you're, I think, so Brandon, given his record, I think that it would be a smart move to make this trade. He's got a good season, but not necessarily locked into the playoffs right now. If you were a team that was undefeated at this point or maybe had 1 loss, I would hold Hunt, try to keep him for that stretch run in the playoffs. But if you are hovering around 500, 4-3, maybe even 5-2, etc., and it's not guaranteed you're getting in, I would take on 2 running backs that are healthy and have decent roles on their team. Josh Jacobs, I think, is very underrated. Has not gone off yet. He dealt with some injuries earlier this season, but he is going to be, especially coming out of this bye, I think he will be healthy again, and then he'll have some good value for you moving forward. So thank you for your question, Brandon. Next questions are from David. So David had a few decisions on Thursday night that I helped him out with in terms of some start-sit decisions. I do feel bad. Unfortunately, Tonyan got hurt. It looked like he almost got a touchdown on 1 play, but unfortunately that didn't happen. But so for your running backs, so it was basically a question between Tonyan and Schultz. I recommended Tonyan for running backs. So assuming you did not play Chase Edmonds and you're faced between Gainwell and Bolden, I would definitely go Gainwell. Bolden, I'm very concerned about for Week 8 going up against the Chargers for them because they were able to put up a ton of points because they were playing the Jets. Bolden does have a potential James White role, but I don't know if you can guarantee that every week. I would rather go with Gainwell because it looks like he's got opportunity as a number 1 running back that's a little more clear, and he's playing Detroit, which is a bad defense. Another question, Keenan Allen or Michael Pittman? And these are both players that I like for this week. Pittman has a ton of upside, but personally I am concerned about Pittman's performances being generally up and down this season. He's had, of the 7 games he's played so far, 3 of them have been great value. The other ones have been mediocre to bust level. So there's potential additionally if T.Y. Hilton comes in and plays that the role may be ill-defined. But given the matchup that Pittman has, he is a very good play. I think Keenan Allen is a better floor, though. Or, I mean, a safer play. So I would kind of base this decision off how you're favored against your opponent. If you need some points this week to catch up to your opponent, I would recommend playing Pittman. But if you want to keep it safer, I think Keenan Allen is a better play, especially with Mike Williams having dealt with a foot injury off the bye. He's going to be healthy for this week, but I do expect Keenan Allen will be decently involved in this game. Question from Andrew N. Thank you for your support to the channel as well. So he had some tight end pickup questions in terms of who to pick up. Some of the guys available were Tyler Conklin, Dan Arnold, and then he had some other guys out there like Tom Sweeney, more kind of fringe players along the lines like that. I think Conklin is the best option you had of that option. So because I think that against Dallas, Minnesota does involve their tight end in their passing game when they do need to pass. It's in the games that they haven't really needed to use the tight ends as much, where they've generally struggled more. But I do think Conklin is a decent play. Engram is another option that you had on your bench as well. I would potentially maybe consider him again for this week if all the other receivers are out, but I really do not like Evan Engram. I think he's way too inconsistent, so I would try to avoid him if you can. And then a difficult decision of 2 wide receivers and a flex needed, and you have to sit one of the 4. Mike Williams, Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, Chase Claypool. So those are all decent plays. The way I rank them is Mike Williams 1, Terry McLaurin, or excuse me, DJ Moore 2, Terry McLaurin 3, and Chase Claypool 4. So these are all, in this situation, I try to think of who has the most potential to bust of these guys. Mike Williams, I think, is the least potential because New England's pass defense has actually not really been as dominant in years past, for one, and heavily involved, and I think that you just have to continue to throw him out there just because of the huge ceiling that he has. DJ Moore would be 2 for me because of the matchup against Atlanta. There's questions with Sam Darnold's play lately and how it's affecting the other receivers on this team, but I do think DJ Moore will have a bounce-back week against Atlanta, which is not a great pass defense at all. And then Terry McLaurin I put 3 because they play a little bit tougher of a matchup than Carolina, but it is a very similar situation between McLaurin and Moore where they're both heavily involved as the wide receiver ones on their team. And then Claypool I would put 4 because a tougher matchup against Cleveland for 1, and 2, Claypool already struggled coming off of the bye. There's questions around this offense in terms of how they're going to use all these players and what Big Ben's capabilities are at this point. So I could very well see a game where they just pass it quite frequently to Najee Harris, not really get Claypool as much involved, much like happened with Seattle. I do think Claypool is a great bounce back, but I think relative to those, and I do think compared to a lot of players, I would still play him, but compared to these other 3 options, I would sit Claypool. Question from Up to No Good. So he's in a league where he's deciding who to start and sit, and this is a league that is full PPR and bonuses for 40-yard and 50-yard receptions. So very beneficial to the receivers. So in this situation, he's got Elijah Mitchell, Dearness Johnson, Michael Carter, Rashad Penny, Darrell Williams as the running back, and then Herbert, but I believe he's referring to Justin Herbert in this situation. Receivers are Tyreek Hill, Mike Williams, Calvin Ridley, T. Higgins, and tight end is Gesicki. So figuring out what running backs to start for this week. So based on your league format, you lock in your receivers. To me, those are the best opportunities for the 40, 50-yard touchdown. Your running backs, your Elijah Mitchell is your best running back option. And then the bulk of his question was who to start in place of Dearness Johnson. So Rashad Penny is an option there that you mentioned. I personally would not do that because Rashad Penny throughout his career has not been very effective. They do have a decent matchup against Jacksonville this week, but Seattle is not an easy backfield to predict at all, and I think that you're taking a huge gamble by putting Penny out there. I would sit him this week. It's a close call between Michael Carter and Darrell Williams, but for me personally, because of the long touchdown bonus that you have, I would play Darrell Williams if I were you. I think that you just look at the comparison of the 2 offenses, Kansas City and New York. And I know Kansas City has had their struggles lately, but it is far more likely to me that Darrell Williams gets that 40 to 50-yard bonus for 1. And then the other thing is that he gets an easier matchup run defense-wise going up against the Giants than Carter does against the Bengals. Carter got a lot of points last week in PPR settings because Mike White just kept dumping it off to the running backs. I don't know if Joe Flacco will do that. So there is high risk for Michael Carter that if the running backs just don't get targeted by the new quarterback, that they will not be effective in this game, especially if they're fall behind, which is likely, and they're not going to be throwing it. So I think your safest bet is to go Elijah Mitchell and Darrell Williams as your running backs for this week. Last fan question is from Keith. So good question this week with regards to kickers. So Younghoe Koo or MacPherson from the Bengals. So a lot of people would play MacPherson, in my opinion, because they're going up against the Jets. They're going to have a lot of points. But I think the Bengals are going to get a lot of touchdowns more than likely, in my opinion. I think that a better play kicker-wise is Younghoe Koo. I talk about kicker formulas and what kickers are generally successful. And to me, it is not... the common opinion for kickers is that the ones that got the highest potent offense that's always scoring are the best. But if they're getting touchdowns, kickers are only getting 1 point out of that drive. Where if they struggle to get the touchdown because of a weaker running game, lack of some offensive capabilities, but they're good enough to get into the red zone or scoring region for kicks, it's better to play those guys. And that specifically applies to Atlanta. That is why Younghoe Koo was one of the best kickers last year, because he tied for number 1 last year with Miami, which was a team in a similar situation, their kicker Jason Sanders, because they were settling for field goals and not scoring touchdowns. And I think in a game against Carolina, they're going to end up in that. Carolina's a decent enough defense that I think they will struggle to score touchdowns. And I think it is likely that they will get a lot of field goals in this game. So, for me personally, I would rather go Younghoe Koo over MacPherson. So, thank you for those of you who commented. We will go through some other questions as well based on scenarios for this week. A lot of questions around Ceedee Lamb and what to do with Dak Prescott's health. So, this question, Ceedee Lamb or Michael Pittman. So, Pittman's got a great matchup. I think it would actually not be a bad play to play Pittman over Lamb if you know for sure that Dak is out. But I would, if you can, I would rather play Lamb because of the ceiling that he has in an offense that, especially in a game that's expected to be high scoring. Lamb was still pretty effective with Andy Dalton last year, although not great, but he did stand out in some games where he didn't have Dak Prescott as a quarterback for one. Another point, too, is that you've got this game on a Sunday night, so you have to, if you are in a situation where you are considering playing Lamb, you have to, if you've already benched your other morning players, then you have to still ride it out with Lamb. And I don't think it's going to hurt you to a huge degree if Dak Prescott does not play. So Pittman is very close to the level at which you might want to sit Lamb, but personally I would rather play Lamb just because of Pittman's up and down performances in the past like I've talked about. Other questions include Ceedee Lamb or Chuba Hubbard. So if you're in a standard, I probably would recommend Chuba Hubbard. Very tough call though. Kadarius Toney, I would not play him over Lamb because that's an even later game and you're relying on health of other players on the Giants. I would personally... Toney is a great player to stash for this week, but I would not put him out there just because of the Monday night schedule. Ceedee Lamb, I'd rather play in that situation. And then Alex Collins, another good debate question. Standard, a great matchup against Jacksonville. But I think if you're in any kind of PPR format, I would play Lamb over him in that situation. Some other questions as well. Devontae Booker, Marvin Jones, or Jarvis Landry. So I think you play Devontae Booker. So first of all, Landry is at the bottom of this list. I'm not playing him over either of these two. I would play Booker in standard leagues, but I would play Marvin Jones in PPR leagues. I think Booker does have potential for touchdowns against Kansas City and could have an amazing game, especially if all the receivers are out. I think Marvin Jones in a PPR setting might be a little better, though. So and they don't exactly have that difficult of a matchup themselves. So I would probably play Jones if it was a PPR format, but Booker if it's standard. So a question of who does you pick two of these six: Allen Robinson, J.D. McKissic, David Johnson, Dearness Johnson, Jacoby Meyers or Samaje Perine. So I was wondering at first why Allen Robinson was still a decision in this, but then I saw some of the other players, and I kind of can tell this is a deeper league. So I still don't think you play Allen Robinson at all. I would, of these guys, play Jacoby Meyers, especially if it's a PPR. Going to get a lot of targets from Mac Jones as their top receiver in New England. And then I would actually play, I think David Johnson is a very sneaky play for this week, especially since the Mark Ingram trade. David Johnson is going to get a lot of PPR value for one, and then two, he's going to get some rushing yard value. He's still a more effective running back than Phillip Lindsay is, even though David Johnson is a lot further past his prime. But I think Johnson is a very sneaky play for this week, especially against Los Angeles, where they're going to be throwing it quite often. They're going to probably struggle on early running downs. This is the kind of thing that bodes well to David Johnson's forte, is to be the pass-catching running back. I think there could be a lot of opportunity for him against the Rams this week. And so I would play Jacoby Meyers and David Johnson of that group. I think Samaje Perine is an interesting dart throw if they get ahead and decide to run the ball a lot, but I'm not 100% sure that will happen. Dearness Johnson, interesting too, but I don't know how much of that role of Kareem Hunt he will take with Nick Chubb there, so we'll get into that in a little bit as well. J.D. McKissic or Cole Beasley. I didn't really talk McKissic too much on the last question, but I'm not a huge fan of him this week, personally, because his role fluctuates quite often in this offense. Cole Beasley is also interesting, but I think against Miami, you're taking you do have a lot of opportunity with Cole Beasley, but he has shown that he has fallen down the pecking order in terms of receivers getting targeted. So I would personally, if you can, rather take McKissic for this week, but I don't think either of them are great plays. DK Metcalf or Khalil Herbert. So Khalil Herbert, another guy his stock is risen significantly. I think this is a little bit too much of a case of overthinking yourself here. DK Metcalf, still the #1 wide receiver for Seattle, and although Geno Smith is not a great quarterback, they do have Jacksonville this week, which is not a good defense at all. I would go DK Metcalf over Khalil Herbert. They're playing San Francisco too, which is it's not a great run defense, but Bears offense is limited, and I would rather go with DK Metcalf personally. So Pat Freiermuth or Rob Gronkowski. So very interesting tight end question here. Gronk is still kind of remains to be seen if he will actually be 100% in this game, but Gronk has got more upside to me. Freiermuth, I think, is getting to that point where you could say he's got a better floor because of the target share, but I would still rather have Gronk in either situation because Freiermuth, I think, still needs a little more time to prove himself as somebody that has got a consistent role in this offense. Myles Gaskin, David Johnson, or Robbie Anderson. So bottom of that list is Robbie Anderson. Gaskin and Johnson are both decent plays. I would rather play Gaskin because against Buffalo, they're going to be behind. They're going to need to throw it to the running back. I think Tua preferences Myles Gaskin a little more than Jacoby Brissett did in previous matchups where Tua was out. So I do like Gaskin a little more over David Johnson. Leonard Fournette or James Robinson. So I think in this situation you go James Robinson because Seattle is a worse rush defense than New Orleans is, which is who Fournette is facing this week. So I would personally rather go James Robinson in that situation. That's the primary motivation for this. And then also New England, or excuse me, I keep calling them New England because Tom Brady's there, but Tampa Bay, you never know exactly which players are going to have down weeks, and it could very well happen to Fournette at some point in time. But I would, either way, even just given the matchup that Robinson has, I would rather play Robinson over Fournette this week. Bench one of the four. So Deebo Samuel, Ceedee Lamb, Stephon Diggs, and Chris Godwin. So in this case, looks like Antonio Brown would be out. I think this is a situation where you sit Ceedee Lamb because you've got questions about the health of Dak Prescott. These other guys are in decent condition for this week where they're going to be pretty involved. So I would sit Ceedee Lamb. If AB was healthy, maybe I would sit Godwin. But I think given the health concerns of Dak Prescott, I think at the later game, I think it would be better to just sit Lamb for this week of those 4 receivers. Gainwell or Collins, both sneaky running backs with good matchups this week. In a PPR format, I would rather have Gainwell. In a standard format, I would rather have Collins personally. And I think this has to do with the ability to get touchdowns and Seattle's offense being generally a little more competent than Philadelphia's. And then Gainwell or Gibson McKissic. I think in this case you go Gainwell. I'm very concerned about Washington's running back core in general, especially Gibson with his shin injury, so I would rather play Gainwell. Damian Harris or Khalil Herbert. So in this case, I would play Khalil Herbert. Damian Harris, good running back, but it's New England's offense is also unpredictable for one, and two, they're very conservative. I'm not saying the Bears are not conservative, but I'm just saying Herbert has looked better and more involved relative to the general share that you could get with New England, where they could very well play a running back roulette and surprise everybody. Devontae Booker, Odell Beckham Jr., or Rob Gronkowski. So Devontae Booker is who I would recommend in this situation. OBJ, I don't even think OBJ needs to be rostered at this point. Gronk is somebody that I think that coming off a rib injury and getting back to the system, he may not be heavily involved. Booker, is a RB1, especially if it's Saquon sits this week, which it looks like will happen. So I would play Booker. Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow. So this is a very interesting question here. I think you sit Joe Burrow because playing the Jets, there is high probability that the Bengals do not need to pass that often. That's why I think it's also possible Chase might have a little bit of a back-to-earth type game, because it's very likely that the very likely scenario is that the Bengals, one of the first plays of the game, Joe Mixon rushes for a 70-yard touchdown, and then they're ahead the whole game, and then they never give up the lead, and they never really need to pass that often. So I would rather play Herbert. I think that game will be more competitive against New England. And then last question, another quarterback question to close this. Ryan Tannehill or Jameis Winston? So I think you got to go Tannehill here. Winston to me is very much a fool's gold type player where he's put up good games when he's gotten a lot of touchdowns, but he has not really thrown for a lot of yards other than the Washington game, but that's because Washington's defense is just a sieve right now. I think that Tannehill is a safer play, and he's got a decent matchup against Indianapolis that I think I would feel more comfortable with him than Jameis Winston. So that's all I got for this video. Let me know if you have any questions leading up to Week 8. I'm not going to be able to put out another football video by the time Sunday's games come around. But if you do have any questions, I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. And for those of you checking this out for the first time, comment on my channel. I respond to everybody who comments about fantasy football, go in depth about their questions. I try to be as informative as I can. So take advantage of that if you need a second opinion or anything. I'm more than happy to help you guys win your fantasy football leagues. So thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.